in the chat box. Oh, I can see people saying hello, Emma. That's a very good sign. Lovely, great. Thank you, Emily, for introducing me, and thanks, National Geographic, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to work with all of you again. I see some familiar people as well, so that's lovely. First of all, good evening, good night if you're from Vietnam. Good morning for some of you. For me, it's evening because I'm based in Dubai, as Emily already said. So I hope we can stay awake for this session because we are going to talk about something incredibly exciting: young learners and grammar. Yeah. Now, this is not always what my young learners think when I talk about grammar. It's something that we have to do in the classroom quite often because parents expect us to teach grammar. The curriculum includes a heavy focus on grammar, but also it's very important because grammar has meaning. It impacts what we want to say. We need it to understand reading, writing, listening, and also grammar is very closely tied with vocabulary. So it's a very important area of language teaching. But as you know, probably not always the easiest when you work with young learners. Now, Emily already said there's lots of different nationalities and people from all over the world. I'm going to ask you, can you tell me a little bit more about the age group you teach before I start this webinar looking at young learners and grammar? 3 till 14-year-olds, wow. 7, 11, 13, all age groups, great, teens, adults. 2 till 16, lovely, great, 1 till 3. Huge variety here in what you teach, children and adults, great. Hopefully today, what we do with the activities and what I talk about, of course, is really aimed at young learners, but young learners has got a very broad definition. So when I speak about young learners in this webinar, I'm mainly looking at students between the age of 6 till about 10 years old. Now, that doesn't mean if your students are 12 or 5 that you can't use it, but you just have to see how you can adapt the activities to make it useful for your age groups. And believe me, some of the activities I do with you today, I do in my adults IELTS classes as well, and they still enjoy it. So hopefully at the end of the session, you go away with a variety of ideas for your young learners classes and see how you can adapt it to other levels as well. Good. So we're talking, of course, about grammar teaching and how we can make it work. But before that, I think it's important that we define what we see as grammar. So I've got a task for you, if you don't mind, because I like you to participate and it's great to see you being so active in the chat box already. Can you please complete my sentence? Grammar is da 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 da. No wrong, no right. What's your definition of grammar? Rules, understanding how language works, great. Patterns, Adriana, nice one. Systems of rules, structure, lovely. Tenses, great ideas there. It's all related indeed to meaning, form and use. And often when we talk about grammar, we speak about the different rules that we use to change words, to combine words, to put those together in a meaningful utterance in various different contexts. So indeed, it's very much a pattern we use to get a certain message across to other people around us. Now, it's the building blocks of language, very much. Grammar and vocabulary is the basics of the language. Students need language skills if they want to succeed in listening, speaking, reading and writing. So it's sort of the basics for the skills as well. And the interesting thing, I think, is also that grammar is quite dynamic. It changes over time. Probably when you were at school, the teacher always said, you can't say loving it, I'm loving it. But nowadays, I'm pretty sure you know the commercial from McDonald's when they say, I'm loving it. So that's sort of become more common in use. So in that way, it's not static, it changes continuously. But indeed, in a nutshell, the bricks of the language that work together to glue, to cement the meaning together. And often that's got to do with patterns. So lovely. Now, this was your answer, but I'm not sure, because if I ask my young learners what grammar is, not the little ones, but maybe the older ones around the age of 9 or 10, they give me a very different definition. What do you think your learners would answer if you ask what is grammar? Other than, can I eat it? But, Carolina, difficult. A pest, Magdalena. Boring. Something they hate, scary, difficult. It's very interesting because we did this webinar this afternoon as well. It was the evil monster in the classroom. It's seen by a lot of students as something they don't like. They're not really looking forward to. It's boring, difficult, negative associations. And for learners, quite often, indeed, they don't know what it is. It is too abstract. And I think that's really important for us to think about. The abstractness of the word grammar already means that it's quite abstract. However, as I said before, we will need to address it, particularly because a lot of parents expect their children to go and take young learner exams. Maybe they expect their children to learn all those rules because this is how they were taught. And like I said already, it's a very important thing, but we need to think about how we teach this to these little people in our classroom. Now, before I'm going to talk more about that, I just wonder how you were taught grammar when you were at school. Was it the same for you? Was it boring, difficult? How was it taught when you were learning English or maybe French or another second language? Through games? Drills? Jara, I don't blame you. I don't remember. It's quite a long time ago. Substitution drills, exercises. Explicitly, Volkan. Nice one. I used to love it. That's really interesting. Theory, then practice. Great. I think a lot of what we have seen in classrooms, and that you can still see maybe in more traditional teaching approaches or teachers that are a lot older, it is quite often the rules, PPP, grammar translation, exercises, and very traditional in the way they teach it. As many exercises as possible, do all the exercises on the page. So in my opinion, I'm not sure, was that very child-friendly? Maybe some of you were lucky with their songs. But in general, I think a lot of older approaches were indeed, like you say, not that child-friendly. It was more focused on the rules and on that accuracy. Interestingly, and I hope that we all had good experiences, but for most of us, it wasn't very child-friendly. But then if you look at our first language experience, and these pictures are trying to illustrate this for you, that's very different. So I'm just going to tell you a short story of one of my friends who's got a 4-year-old son, and he, in the morning, went out with his father. They went to the park. They cycled in the weekend. When he came home, Mum asked him, "So what did you do this morning?" Yeah, and Oliver answered, "Oh, I go to the park with my daddy." And Mum was saying, "You go to the park with your daddy? What did you do this morning?" "Oh, Mummy, I told you, I go to the park with my daddy." Yeah? So Oliver was explaining, or sort of repeating that sentence. Why do you think he repeated his mistake? Indeed, a tense mistake, past simple. Why did he repeat this when mother asked again? Overgeneralization. Nice one. Self-correction. So remember, he's 4 years old, right? Because possibly, Marushi, he doesn't really understand that time yet. And I think if we look at first language learning, it's very common that children make these mistakes as well. And as somebody already mentioned, it's called overgeneralization. It happens a lot because your brain automatically, believe it or not, is hardwired to find patterns in the world around you. So he has noticed a pattern every time his mum or his dad speaks about something they did before. They watched, they listened, they played. Therefore, Oliver has made he goes and maybe he bites. But indeed, Yolanda, this was really what Oliver wanted to do. He wanted to communicate his message. For him, it's not important if it comes across correctly. The rules are not important. It's all about the meaning of his message. And indeed, he possibly doesn't know, Ruslana, yet that we say, I went to the park with my daddy, but it's not important either because he got the message across, right? He go to the park with daddy. It's about meaning. So if we look at children learning English of that young age, it's not about accuracy. It's really focusing on getting my message across. And that's quite different sometimes from what we see happening in the second language classroom. Yeah. So if you look at the second language classroom, there's two general approaches to grammar teaching in particular. There is one that you probably know as the deductive approach to grammar teaching, which is very much rule-driven. It seemed like a lot of you have experienced that. So we maybe get the rules from the teacher, then we practice with those rules, and then we do something a little bit freer with that language we have been taught. The other approach, of course, is more that discovery-driven, the inductive approach to grammar teaching, where we have a nice context, the grammar is embedded in that context, and we ask our learners questions to notice those patterns and to pull out the rules. So that is often a lot more focused on the meaningful context in a way that suits our children a lot better. But then still we're asking questions to figure out the rules. And that works well with your teenagers, I think. It works very well with those older, younger learners. But at age group from 6 till 10, we have to be careful that we're not too abstract and that we don't have a rule-driven approach when we teach them grammar. One of the reasons research says this is actually this quote. It's quite old, but it's proven to still be true. What number would you put on the blank there? Wow, lots of you are typing. Interesting. Great, I've got all the numbers here now, I think. This is a quote from Piaget, quite old, but you know, educational psychologist from Switzerland, did lots of research on how children learn. And in his research, which actually still comes out when they currently test children, till about the age of 10, 11, children don't have that ability to think abstractly. It's all about concrete thinking. Not only in language learning, I think also when you look at teaching mathematics, I don't know if any of you are involved in maths. I used to love teaching that in primary school. Kids at a very young age, they have all these coloured frogs or maybe M&Ms or whatever coloured items they move around because they need to see what 10 looks like. They can't have imagination when they start learning that what 10 looks like if you give them the number 10. So indeed, till about this age, your brain is not ready to deal with with abstract ideas mentally. Yeah, when they get a bit older, I think we can actually break useful language and meaningful chunks of language up, and they can start working to notice a lot more detail in the patterns. But at this young age, that's not really what our brain can do just yet. Yeah? And that actually brings us to a very important question. Can we actually teach grammar to young learners? How do you feel about this? What do you think? Can we actually teach it to our 6 to 10-year-old students. Lovely. Unconsciously, not direct. Yes, modeling, inductive. I see lots of beautiful ideas. And Magda, I think you're right. It's not directly teaching. So it depends a little bit on your definition of teaching, right? Because there are a lot of things that are very different about these smaller people we teach in the classroom. They, first of all, don't often have enough language knowledge of the first language to make comparisons with English. As somebody already stated, they don't have the meta language to talk about grammar as such. As I already mentioned before, they're not ready to separate meaning and form. It's all about meaning. What can I get done with that language? Also, their motivation is very different. They're not in the classroom because they understand that English is good for their future job. They are there because mum and dad sends them there, or the school requires them to take English lesson. And the last one, definitely the most important one, your brain functions very differently when you're young. It's processing language in a very different way. It's taking it as meaningful chunks, not as separate rules or Lena. Indeed. So for us, I think we need to think or rethink, what does teaching grammar actually mean? Maybe we need to think of it in such a way that it means creating the conditions in which our children can learn that useful language that we call grammar. But indeed, explicit, direct teaching of grammar might not be the best, because that's just not what they're ready for yet. And it is a foreign language, so they need a lot of support. Cameron, she's got a lovely book of teaching languages to young learners. This is a quote that she uses in her book. It means indeed that children see any other language, and even their first language initially, from what it means. What can I do with the language? What action does it go with? And what do I get out of it? So actually, what's in it for me? Yeah, and Oliver was saying, I go to the park with Daddy. The message is clear, right? What are you on about? So it's really all about meaning first. That interaction with the language is, what does it do? What do we achieve using that language? Now, quick summary of what we just spoke about before we go and look at practical activities with you. A bit of a grammar activity for you. Chunks of language. Can you put them in the right order for me, please? Alicia, thank you. It's a really nice activity, actually, with Lego. What's the name of the book, Carolina? Teaching Languages to Young Learners, Cameron, 2001. But in the PDF, I'll put the reference list for you as well. Children are not oh, look at that. I'm so amazed that I don't see any spelling mistakes here. You're typing so fast and correctly. I'm showing my age here. Let's have a look then. Right, so that's what we sort of established already. What does that mean? I see lots of people typing away on this one. Yes, indeed. So they have trouble understanding direct grammar explanations, direct rules, if we come up with that, because their brain isn't ready for that yet. It will be later on, but not at that stage. Yes. So what does that mean for us teachers? What's the impact for this on our job? It's a bit of a long one, sorry. Yeah, Marina, if you can do that, indeed, build on their first language is a very good one. we need a bit of thinking here about these chunks, don't we? Erica, wow. Finesco, great. Yes, engaging context in a nutshell. I shall rescue you by pressing the arrow. Here you go. So this really is what it means for us teachers. Yeah, because they're not ready yet. We still need to teach them grammar, but we can't do it directly. We need to embed that grammar in a meaningful and engaging context. So it doesn't feel for them that they're being taught the rules, but they get exposure to the language, and we need to help them notice that language as well. Because children just have an amazing ability to absorb all sorts of new language from games and from activities they enjoy, and that enjoying is very important for them. So how good their language is at that young age does not really depend on how well they know the grammar rules. It's really that using and exposure of that meaningful English around them. So a language-rich environment, that's what we need to create. Now, I think you probably know this statement as well. So we need to think about how they learn. Not only think about learning styles, I also think here about what Piaget said about children, Vygotsky, Brunner, and Montessori. Remember Maria Montessori? I think she had a beautiful statement, and she said, play is the job of the child. So they love playing. This is how they learn, by doing, by touching things, and also by interacting not only with the language, but also with others, working with others, that co-constructing and collaborating. And then again, of course, your role is to support them in that process. So indeed, Evelyn, play is such an important thing for children. It's much more developmentally appropriate to have our children play with the language and in that way acquire the grammar than bluntly, directly teaching us, as some of us have experienced. So we go into a more developmentally appropriate approach to teaching grammar. Now, as you can see here, I've not spoken about age-appropriate teaching. A lot of course books do talk about age-appropriate teaching. My worry there is that one age group is not the same as the other age group. I've never seen one 7-year-old exactly the same as the other 7-year-olds. So I usually say in my classroom, I try to find the level they're at and then try to match my teaching style to that cognitive developmental level and not so much on their age. Yeah? And also when we talk about this, I think we need to be aware that exposing our learners is really important. But if you look at research, it also says it's not enough to just expose our learners to all these songs and great activities and stories. We need to make them notice this language. And the concept of noticing is a very important one, because if you don't see it, you don't attend your brain to something, you're not going to remember it. Your brain doesn't work like that. We all have it, even as adults. You might say, oh, did you see that? What? I didn't see it. If I don't see it, I can't store it in my brain. So we need to make sure that we get students to be sort of immersed in this language and also find tasks that they can actually see how the language is used. So we've got a job to do there to create that optimal condition for learning. And a bit of planning there we need, because we need to think about how we're going to get this context, how we're going to make our students notice and play with that language, and what are we going to do and make them do with the language at the end. Yeah? So that language-rich environment is what I'm looking for, and a lot of approaches to teaching children is still very similar to present, practice, produce. Now this one might be very similar, but I think it sounds a lot more child-friendly. I'm going to introduce you to the M&Ms of teaching grammar. And there's a few words missing. Have a read and see if you want to have a go at guessing the 3 missing M's. So what's missing? They need to the new language, memorizing, Rita. That's a really important one, actually. Nice that you say that, because there's a lot out in the world about it's not about knowledge anymore for our students. It's all about them having skills. But to be honest, if you want our learners to have the skills to listen, speak, read, and write, they do need that basic facts of the language. They do need to memorize the grammar and the vocabulary to a certain extent, indeed. Right, need, memorize, and make. I see some excellent guesses. You know what? Let's go through all of them. I'll give you the words, and then at the end I see how much you remember there with my M&Ms. Good. So the M&Ms is very much a structured approach, as you will see, in which the students meet that new language. And then slowly we get them to engage more with that and let them go more and more. So we're actually scaffolding them and give them a very structured approach to build confidence using that new language. So let's have a look then at the first stage there. That is meeting that new language in a meaningful context. Before we look at meeting it, I'm going to ask you a question about that meaningful context, or that model, Laura, as you're on about. What sort of meaningful context could we offer our primary learners in the classroom? Dialogues, stories, songs, memorable activities, chants. I love that. Oh, Carolina, I'm going to get back to that one in a minute. Erica, yes. Storyboards, dialogues, diaries, conversations. Lovely. Have a look. I think you find a lot of similarities here. Tongue twisters as well, yeah. Good, so my aim with any of these contexts is to provide comprehensible input to my students. And indeed, very often it could be a song, a chant, or a rhyme, because primary learners really respond well to that. It could be realia as well, or maybe visuals like an image or a video, because it makes the language real. It shows them what it looks like. Dialogue, situations, or actions, they really bring the language alive. Stories as well, they make it alive around them. So they're very much child appropriate ways of getting them to hear and or see the language in a meaningful context. And that really helps, particularly with songs and chants and images. It really helps as well to remember it for our learners. Yeah, because if they have a song in their head, it will keep on coming back in their head. So even long after your lesson is finished, they're still playing with that language when they're singing. Yeah, so that's a really nice way to create that meaningful context. And I can remember who said before as well, the context also needs to be relevant to our student life. Remember, they were not intrinsically motivated to learn English because they don't really know why they're learning it yet. So they need to be able to see that interconnectedness, as we call it, between what's happening in their life and what that English language is doing. So in our world, for example, the topics are very much something our students can relate to. My world, insects, creatures, your family, that's also something most of our students relate to very well. My house doesn't look the same, but you've got a house too, right? The classroom. Again, it might look different, but it's very nice to see that other students have the same experience. And this is really that interconnectedness that's so important. Life outside the classroom needs to link very closely to what we do in the classroom. How are you? I don't know how old kids are in the first language. Quite quickly, we do all the greetings and I'm happy and I'm sad. Yeah? And they're beautiful coloured pictures as well, I think. And let's celebrate. We've all got festivals, right? And indeed, it's in different worlds. So you're actually bringing the world into that classroom, seeing what it's like in other countries. what other people do. And I think in our world where we live in at the moment, it's very important that our students start to get more understanding for how other people live in different worlds, and that there's so many similarities, more similarities in our lives than there are differences, really. But good. I'm going to stay on this unit for a little bit with you. This is from Our World, which is a beautiful series from National Geographic, level 3, and it's unit 8, and we're going to talk about celebrations, if you don't mind. So before I'm going to do anything with my students, I want to warm up their brain cells a little bit. And I might say, okay, we looked at this before. Remember, what sort of things do we celebrate in our countries? So maybe you can give me an idea of what do you celebrate in your countries? Christmas, Nowruz. Oh, that's coming up very soon, I think, Mahrams. National Day, birthdays, Easter, Carnival, lovely. Eid al-Iftar, yes, also pretty soon. Day after day. See, this is fascinating. I'm already learning from you. St. George, April's Fool's Day. Do we celebrate that? Great. Good. Now, my next question for you would then be, so how do you celebrate? What do you do when you celebrate? Do you do something special when you celebrate? Decorate. Parades. Ooh. Posters, crafts, parties, special meals, eating a lot. Visiting, lovely, that sounds beautiful. So I've got sort of activated my students' prior knowledge. I've set that context of celebration, which they now can relate to, because I think one of the issues is, even if we use the most beautiful song or story, if our students don't have any relation to it, it's not going to be remembered, because you cannot remember what you don't know. Now, also, again, this is from Cameron, we need to make sure that students are enabled to understand that context we're going to give the grammar in. Yeah, so I'm going to continue and I'm going to revisit the words we studied last week. So if you can be my students again, that would be amazing. I'm going to see if you remember this word. This is also sometimes something we do when we celebrate. Have a look at the picture. What do I wear when I celebrate? Any ideas? Indeed, yay! Special costumes, fancy dresses, lovely. Now, if you don't have an IWB in your classroom and can't use PowerPoint, there's beautiful flashcards as well that you can use, yeah? So I just made a template in PowerPoint and I click and slowly it reveals what it is. So we celebrate with costumes. Good memory. Now there's another one, and this time I'm not going to use my electronic whiteboard, but I don't know if you can see it. Can you see my magic eye? What else do we do when we celebrate? I need to find my camera. What? I don't know. Can you see my flashcards? Ooh, a picture. Well, it was a bit hard because you're very far away, but what do I wear? It's a mask. Lovely. So I'm just checking if you remember the word mask. Now, this is just a piece of paper with a hole in it that is bigger than my flashcard, and I move it over the flashcard and all my students can have a peek. So that way, it makes it more interesting than just showing them the flashcard. Of course, there are lots of different ways. We can also do something like this, a slow refill. When people walk together on the music, they are walking in a... Yeah, the carnival has lots of this, Carolina. Thank you. There's a parade, indeed. And there is lots of other things happening as well to the music. Dancing, lovely. So what I've just done, I've sort of activated students' prior knowledge, activating what they already know to make sure that they are enabled to listen and understand the song we're going to play next. Why is this so important? For this reason. Now, again, I have to say it's a very old quote from 1968, but if you look at research and even cognitive science and a lot of neuroscience now, they can see exactly with electrodes to your head what's happening when you're learning. So when we activate that schemata or that prior knowledge, even if that word comes out in Portuguese or in Spanish, in Russian or Arabic, that's fine. If that activates, that word is active. That new word I'm teaching can now find a place to be linked to. If you don't activate this prior knowledge, the new word comes in and floats about. It cannot be stored very easily in your brain. So even though Ausubel spoke about this in 1968, there is more and more evidence that when you activate prior knowledge, it's easier to connect the new knowledge and store it in your brain. So that is why it's so important. It makes it more stickable. It makes it easier to remember. So, good. So I've warmed them up, activated prior knowledge. So I think it's time for the song now. Good. So Emily, could you move the song in a minute so we can play it? I'll just have to give my instructions. So what we're going to do is every time you hear a word we did, remember, dance. Maybe you can show me dance. Parades. We might have established with the kids that that's this. So when you hear that word, you're going to show me that action. The mask, well, this might be a nice one for mask. And costume, maybe this one. Yeah, so when you hear the words that you know, I think there was dress up as well. Yeah, dress up might be something like this. You hear one of the words, even though the form might be different. They might say danced. They might say dressed up. When you hear it, you're going to show me the words you hear. So let's play about 1 minute and 20 and see how we go. Are you ready behind your desks? Let's go.
Activity 4. Listen, read and sing.
We went to a carnival. Everyone was there. We dressed up, sang some songs, and watched a parade. But best of all, we danced to music, wonderful music. We danced to music all day long. We danced to music, wonderful music. We danced to music all day long. Did you like the food? Yes, I like the food. Did you dress up? Yes, I went as a frog. We danced to music, wonderful music.
Thank you, Emily. Great. It's a beautiful song, isn't it? And it's got a really nice beat to it as well. Good. So hopefully you're moving along there as well with me. So we sing the song with our students. We might sing it again. We might even come up with more words that we want to get movement for, so that meaningful context is really set for our learners. And then I might say, let's see what you remember. And I might go, did you like the food? And you respond to me, yes, I. Did you like the food? Yes, I like the food. So we want them to give back. It's call and response. It's very much something we do quite a lot in New Zealand. Did you like the food? It's me calling, you respond, yes, I like the food. Right, let me try it again. Did you dress up? Yes, I dressed up. Carolina, fabulous. Did you like the costumes? I like the costumes, great. So you're actually, what you're doing in this call and response, and of course you have already guessed it as teachers, you're trying to make your students focus on the target language of this song. What do you think the target language is in this particular song? Past tense, Alexandra, yes, simple past. And we actually looking initially, the first grammar point in this unit is the regular past simple. The second grammar point, they're going to look at seesaw, go, went. So indeed, so my call and response is trying to get that language back for my students. And what you notice there is that we're very much looking at meaningful chunks. With kids, we don't just go danced, dressed up, because that meaningfulness of the language comes because it's in a phrase. So it's much more meaningful. It's a very simple pattern, quite short, but also if you look at it and you break it up, that's can already be too abstract. So at this stage, we're just looking at that meaningful chunk. The other reason why chunks are so important in teaching, and I'm not saying only for young learners, also when you teach adults, collocations, set phrases and fixed expression, your brain is storing it as a chunk. So I might say something like mask, and my students might go like, oh, did you see the masks? You know, so they actually remember it as a chunk, which really enhances the power of storing, but also that fluency. They don't need to think as hard to get that language back. Indeed, Grace, it's easier to store, therefore easier to remember for our students, and enhancing that fluency is quite useful. Good, so my students have sort of been zoomed in on that language by the call and response activity I did, and then I'm slowly going to move them to that next stage. So we meet the language, we notice that language, and then we're going to manipulate or interact with that language in different ways. So at this stage, they're going to interact with that language because we're revisiting it, we're reviewing maybe how it's formed, with the aim of consolidating it further in their brain. And of course, not personalization yet, because I think for kids, we definitely need another step. We need to give them a little bit more time and more support before they get there. So get them to interact and play with that language. There are a few really important things there, and you already know this. As a young learner's teacher, you want to make sure that manipulating or interacting with the language is offered in very different ways. So we're not only singing, we're not only drawing, you want to give them multi-sensory input. What we just with the words, there's listening to it, they've seen the flashcards, they've done the movement, and possibly you've introduced the spelling of that word as well. Again, it suits kids because they like to move, but also again, if you look at the science of the brain, the science of learning, which you might have noticed is something I'm really interested in, it stores this one item of language in different ways in the brain. So your pathways, different pathways are actually activated. Yeah, so you might activate the picture when you show the flashcard, the sound, the movement. So when I'm trying to get the word back, there are 4 different ways that my brain can help me bring that word back. So it makes deeper learning happen, and therefore actually easier recall that they can produce it again. So sensory integration, very important in your classroom. So let's look at this activity then in the course book. Look at the activity in the course book. It looks a bit, it's nice, but I think we can do a lot more with it. Now, this is the grammar that you already sort of highlighted as the target language. So I want to bring that back to my students, and I want them to notice what the pattern is here. Did you watch the parade? Yes, I watched the parade. We can sing that in the same rhythm, however you want to do it, but I quite like to do it like this and see what they remember. So they might say, did you watch the parade? Yes, I watched the parade. Yeah. So here what you see happening is a bit of highlighting with colour. And I might go, did you dance? Did you dance at a party? Beautiful sentence. And what would be your reply? Yes, I danced. So here you're really highlighting actually the form of this. Yeah, but you're not saying we're speaking about past simple regular, we're adding ed, you're really just showing so they can see how it works. And then I might split up this page a little bit with my students and get them to think about what else can we say here. Did you listen to? Make me a sentence. Did you listen to? The song. Lovely. Thank you, Hob. Did you listen to the song? Yes, I. And what are we going to reply? Or did you listen? Yes, I listened to the song. So you're just going to bring that back. You can use these. You've highlighted it, but you're not really going into depth at this stage. Yeah. Did you play? Yes, I played. Did you like? Yes, I liked. Good. So we had a look at these words and how we make them, and then we can do the exercise, but I'm going to do that in a different way again with you because I want you to be very active as learners because grammar can be great fun. Yeah. So I'm going to give you something like this, a mini whiteboard and a marker. So I'm going to dictate a sentence to you, but I'm not saying every word. One of the words sounds like a beep. What you need to do is decide which of these words fits in my sentences, write it down on a mini whiteboard and hold it up to show me what word you have actually chosen. So just let me find my sentences. And I'm going to ask you, because you don't have mini whiteboards, to type that word in the chat box for me. So, for example, I might say, the parade was great. We beep to music from many countries. Well done, class. Listen, great. They write it up, they clean it off, and we go for the next sentence. After dinner, all the children beep games. Fabulous. And they write down play, they hold up the mini whiteboards for me. Excellent. And I get to see a bit of spelling practice. I get to see what they understand. And it's much more fun than actually just sitting and doing this in their course book. But nothing stops you from, after doing the mini whiteboard, saying, okay, now go to your book and finishing off the exercise individually. But there's a lot of different movements happening and thinking and a bit of fun. So hopefully something you could use if you don't already use this in your classroom. Good. Now we need multiple opportunities for our students to practice. So this was quite scaffolded and controlled. I'm going to use a little bit of contrastive teaching to find out what they can do more independently. So I'm going to go back to the picture that is at the beginning of the unit. That one we opened the unit with. So my students have the picture in front of them, and on the whiteboard I might write this sentence. Let me know if you're happy with my sentence. Oh, if you're not happy, can you please correct me, silly teacher? Rita, indeed, look at the picture. She's not playing a guitar, she played the drum. Great. Next sentence. Have a good look at the picture and think back to what we listened to. They listen to a story. So my students, correct, exactly, Carolina, they listen to a song. Let's see if that's correct then. Yes, last one. Great. Now, this is very easy for you, of course, but you see that I'm going from meaning, drum music, to using that verb in the past tense incorrectly and them correcting me. So you're actually really giving them opportunities to experiment and play a little bit with that language here. I hope this is fun and engaging for your learners. I call it silly sentences or silly teacher. Yeah, because that's, oh, I made a mistake. And I think it's really important that we sometimes make mistakes and laugh about that ourselves, because mistakes are invaluable for learning. And a lot of students, unfortunately, get told off or are afraid of making mistakes. It's the best way of learning. We know exactly what we can work on then. So I'm trying to normalize that as well. Indeed, Marouche, it might make them feel better. I might make mistakes too. Now, once you've done this with 4 or 5 sentences, I would say to my students, okay, take a sticky note. Can you write one silly sentence for your partner? They write their own sentence, they stick it in their partner's book, and they need to correct each other's work. Yeah, so that's a fun way of seeing what they have learned and what you want to return to in the next step of your lesson. Now, I speak about fun, but engaging is maybe a better way of saying it. I try to use a lot of emotions in my classroom, and emotions often have to do with feeling good. Yeah, having fun, and for kids, that play is a very important emotion. As we all know, they behave better when they have positive emotions in the classroom, but also there's something else happening. This looks very serious, doesn't it? I'll keep it short. So when kids are in the flow and are really engaged in what they're doing, your body produces an acid which is called glutamate. What do the first 3 letters sound like? It sounds like glue. So what happens? Remember, you activated the prior knowledge and you got that new knowledge coming in. And when students feel emotionally positive and safe, that glue helps you to link that new item of information to the old item of information. So that's again why this prior knowledge activation is so important. So we've glued the ideas together, but I've got to be disappointing you because it's not super glue. It only lasts for a short while. However, if there's positive feeling happening and the emotions are triggered, the limbic system produces something else, which is absolutely amazing. Dopamine, it's called, and it's actually concrete. So you link those new ideas with the old ideas, and it's trying to go, but dopamine kicks in, and it's consolidating happiness emotion. Indeed, it is consolidating that knowledge so you can store it better. Doesn't mean that you remember it tomorrow, but you store it deeper. To remember it easily, we need to revisit and revise, but the storing is the first step to learning. And guess what causes the limbic system to create or to develop the dopamine? Happy feelings, positive emotions. So other activities you can do in your class to activate emotions is to go to one of these. Lots of the words we looked at, I think we selected 4 this evening, and I might say, okay, work with a partner, ask and answer. There is about 11 different tasks. That is too many in my classroom. So I bring in lots of sticky notes, happy smiley faces. All my students get 3 smiley faces and they select the 3 that they want to talk about. So they put their stickies there, they find a partner in class, and then they talk about the one they want to talk about. Did you go to a party? Did you dance at the party? So you're really giving them those positive emotions, which enhances that learning. Lovely. So that's a very simple idea. If you don't have stickies, colored pens or bits of these sticky notes that you can cut up will do. really engaging for your learners. Thank you, Carolina. So good. Meet the language to notice it, manipulate or interact with that language in a memorable and motivating way. And then the last one we're going to is, after this, because that's what we've done already, is making that language their own. So here is where that personalization comes in. We've given them opportunities for that controlled practice, if you want to call it that way, and we want to move on to that freer practice. Now remember, if you get students to use language in a personalized manner, there's a lot less support if you see in this exercise here. So we might need to scaffold them a little bit more here. Again, simple way of scaffolding. You can put all these words on colored cards. As you can see, every word has a different color, and we can get students to model how we make a sentence. Maybe you can help me out. Played we games yesterday. What's my sentence? It's a great activity, body grammar. We played games yesterday, lovely. Now my students do 2 sentences as a model, and then we get to see that every sentence has the same structure. So I'm not teaching them subject plus verb plus complement. I'm teaching them yellow word plus blue word plus green word. So this is the order that can really scaffold and support their thinking. Color coding. Again, looking at brain research is a very powerful way for students to store that information. Yeah? So that's a way of scaffolding. Another way of scaffolding for our students is what you will see in the workbook. It's very nicely done. They're going to draw a picture of their favorite festival. Very clear instructions, right? Write about what you ate, what you drank, what you wore, and what you saw. But not all my students find that very easy. Writing, So first thing I want to do is get an emotion involved. Think about your favorite festival. What music do you hear? And you can see them starting smiling or coming up to the YouTube so we can listen in the classroom to the song they've chosen. But then some of my students still struggle. Not a problem. Why not split out the 4 tasks into 4 different frames? Draw what you ate, what you drank, what you wore, and what you saw. And if you want, you can even link that to 4 different songs in your brain, 4 different emotions. Once we've got these 4 little frames, they can write those 4 sentences underneath that together form a lovely paragraph. So be creative if you need to scaffold them in this last stage and make it motivating, because it's not easy. We're expecting we teach something and they produce at the end of a lesson. I don't always know how realistic that is. And of course, very much tactile. They can always go for the projects in your book as well to make a mask. Good. I'm going to round off. I'm going to see what you remember after this last slide. So make sure you give them time to personalize that language and experiment using that. So my little step of M&Ms for child-friendly grammar teaching was meeting new language in a meaningful contexts. Good, so they had to notice that in there. Once they had noticed that language, we're going to manipulate the language in a memorable, great, and multisensory way. Because multisensory enhances that stickability of language before we're going to make that language their own using motivating activities. Good. And if you still get parents asking you why you do games, activities, and songs, there is so much to say for this in the classroom, not only based on previous theories, also on modern day research. Engagement really enhances that learning. Karina, I'm happy that parents love them too, because that's not the case, unfortunately, everywhere. But just make them aware that play and positive emotions enhance engagement, emotions start to work, dopamine starts to fire, so learning becomes much more effective. But above all, your role is to make sure that it's of the right level what you offer your learners. And it's a fabulous course book, Our World, but we need to see if we need to scaffold or make it a little bit harder to get that healthy level of struggle for our students. Because with young learners, as you all know, if it's too easy, they're gone. If it's too hard, they're not even going to try. So think about creating that healthy struggle level and creating those conditions for learning in your classroom by making it meaningful, motivating, multisensory, because that's all you can do. The rest your learners need to do themselves. They need to do the learning, but we need to create those conditions. Now, I hope that in today's webinar, you've got some ideas of how you can create a child appropriate or developmentally appropriate context for learning and teaching grammar. And I hope that you're going to experiment with some of the ideas in the classroom. So thank you so much for being here. Any questions, type them in, and I will give you a reference at the end in the PDF as well with my slides. So thank you so much for being here. Let me see if I've got some books here for you. And Emily, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. Really appreciate you spending an hour with us, and we hope you have some helpful tips to walk away using your classroom for young learners. So thanks again, Anna. A few last just wrap-up notes as we end here. Many of the examples Anna used today, they're from the first edition of Our World. The second edition of Our World is coming out soon, so stay tuned for more information on that in the coming months, but we're really excited about it. It's our best-selling series across all National Geographic learning products, so definitely stay tuned for that. We will be sending along a certificate of attendance, the recording, as well as the slides from the session, and it will be posted on our webinar archive. So stay tuned for that, and we'd love for you to join us again soon. We do have a webinar on the 26th, so coming up next week, and that's for teaching young learners and teens as well. So definitely you can sign up for that on our website if you have a chance. And definitely be sure to check out our InFocus blog. I'm going to send you all to the survey right now. If I do see a question about the second edition of Explore Our World, no, this will just be a new edition of Our World. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to send you to the survey now. Thanks for being here today.